If you are here for the Scaling Your Workers' Comp Experience into a Competitive and Profitable Service Line webinar, you are indeed in the right place. I'm really excited for our conversation today. We were just chatting backstage, and we've got a great crew here. We'll find out in the introductions, but there's a really good spread in terms of practice shape and size and strategy and thinking. It's going to be really well-rounded. So I'm Joe Zboch. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Hatch, and I'll be the host for the day. The less I talk, the better, because we've got a lot of wisdom between these three panelists. Workers' comp, of course, is one of the few service lines where how you run your operations directly impacts kind of the efficiency, administrative sludge, as well as the growth, because it's such a competitive referral. It's a service line about speed and experience, and we're going to dive really deep into that today. The arc of the conversation will start with challenges, then we'll get into some of the best practices, lessons learned, and then lastly, what each of the panelists are working on next. I would assume if you want to email them or text them or send them snail mail for specific questions, they're more than willing to help. That's one of the great things about the orthopedic community. As I think, Toni, you even connected with someone on Shannon's team way prior to this, right? So like this is the vibe. Let's have some fun. Let's ask questions, and we'll kick off with introductions and then get right into the meat of the conversation. Chris, why don't you go first? Tell us a little bit about who you are, about DMOS as a practice.
Sure. Thanks, Joe. My name is Chris Schooley. I'm at Des Moines Orthopedic Surgeons here in Des Moines, Iowa. And we're kind of a medium-sized orthopedic group of 26 physicians and, all the extra services, MRI, imaging, all things that you would expect with orthopedic group, physical therapy in-house. I'm workers' compensation and network strategy manager here. I've been here about 9 months, and we're really in the growth phase. I was brought in to help the business development side of things to grow our practice and our volumes. So I'll hand it off to the next person.
Shannon, you want to go next?
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name's Shannon. I'm with Advanced Bone and Joint right outside of St. Louis, Missouri. We are a private practice with 3 locations. We have 11 physicians and 11 APPs that work with us. We have been involved in workers' compensation for a very long time. I've been in the practice 20 years and have sat in some different roles and watched how our work comp program has grown, and we also want to continue to grow that as well.
Thank you. Toni?
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Toni Vivien, and I lead the workers' compensation and insurance pay operations for OrthoLoneStar. I oversee the centralized work comp team within our MSO model, supporting multiple orthopedic divisions and more than 190 physicians across Texas. Our centralized work comp team is made up of specialists who focus on different areas of the process, including referrals, verifications, authorizations, and back-end claims management. Centralizing those functions allow us to create consistency across clinics while supporting unique needs of each location and provider.
Thank you. Okay, for those of you who may have just dropped in, here's the lay of the land. We've got Shannon from ABJ, which is a little bit of a smaller independent practice in the heart of the country. We've got DMOS, more midsize. And we've got Toni at OrthoLoneStar with a centralized model within their MSO. So keep that in mind as we ask these questions, because we've got a great wealth of knowledge and range of approaches. But the central driver here is workers' comp is a really good service line to grow and to develop. And it's a complicated system, but it's one that at the root of it is empathy and getting people back to work and caring for them. Workers' comp is a competitive service line. And so that's what I really want to dig into is the challenges here. Independent groups, big or small, have identified it as one of the areas that they want to grow. So Toni, I want to take it to you. You run a centralized team and you've got big national partners, CareNow, Concentra. As you process more volume, where does it strain first? What are the expectations that these partners have when they're working with OLS at that centralized MSO level?
As our volume grows, I think the first thing that strain really isn't billing. It's really about communication and coordination. One of the things that I've learned is that our referral partners rarely remember the hundreds of referrals that went smoothly, but they remember the one patient that wasn't contacted properly or their surgery wasn't approved and it caused a delay. Work comp is very relationship-driven service line. Every referral involves multiple stakeholders, the employer, adjusters, nurse case managers, providers, schedulers, therapists. As volume increases, every breakdown in communication becomes magnified. So national partners like Concentra and CareNow expect consistency across every one of our clinics, and they expect timely appointments, quick authorization, overall quick turnaround times. So we have been able to report on our performance. Our partners want to know how quickly we're scheduling their patients, and they're looking for transparency and reliability. So at the end of the day, our goal is to make it easy to do business with, and our referral partners know that they can send a patient anywhere within our organization and receive the same high level of service and communication.
Of patient into your practice. Shannon, I was talking with Maggie from your team a couple weeks ago, where it's almost as if a carrier or partner adjuster likes one person at the practice, they like the whole practice. But if they don't like one person, then it's possible that the whole practice is almost like blacklisted. So tell me, your relationships are important, very community driven. As volume grows for y'all, what is putting the partner experience at risk from your perspective?
Putting partner risk at the risk is definitely lack of communication, just like Toni said. You have to provide or create the trust, right? If they don't have trust in you that you're going to deliver quality care, communicate well, and be very timely, then that trust cannot be evolved by the partners because there are so many other potential physicians that they could go to that they'll get that from. And frankly, the adjusters and the employers want to get the injured employee back to work as soon as possible. And it boils down to time. Time is of the essence to get treatment going, get them back to work, even if they're back to work with restrictions. That's important to employers and adjusters as well.
Yeah. Chris, DMOS is in a posture right now where you're in a competitive market and you're very intentionally looking to grow. We've talked a lot about relationship. We talked a lot about communication. What are the challenges that you're facing, either in addition to that, or if you want to echo what's been said when it comes to really being growth minded in a competitive market where there's another player in the space?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I think you're going to hear a lot of consistent themes here with communication and relationships, I think, across all of our questions. But really kind of the top of mind things to answer your question, having any slow access to care, I mean, that's going to be just terrible for anyone's experience, whether it's the employer, whether it's just a commercial patient who's coming to your services. So making sure that they have the access to our care, that they can get in when they want to. There's not long waits. They don't have different experiences. We want our external partners, both adjusters, employers, nurse case managers, to have a similar experience that's consistent, that they know what to expect when they're going to, give us the privilege of taking care of their employee. And I think along the lines with the inconsistencies you want to avoid, it is just really poor communication, like Shannon and Toni talked about. You don't want the delays. You don't want there to be anything that they're having to reach back out to you for, that they have the expectation of when they should expect to receive it, and that it's going to be formatted well. It's going to be consistent across all of our different positions.
A moment ago mentioned you have to create that trust. And it sounds like, Chris, one of the ways that you really do that is by setting that expectation and, most importantly, delivering on it. Can you walk us through like a specific change? Because I know you were brought on 9 months ago, as you mentioned, as a network strategy and workers' comp manager at DMOS, specifically with, the goal to grow this thing. So what's one thing that you've put in place that has really made a positive impact for DMOS to be more competitive, and maybe talk through the before and after?
I'd say one of the biggest things for us is really adding a workers' compensation portal. That was something that was asked for by our external partners. And really prior to the portal process, our coordinators were kind of just going every which direction. You'd get an email and then now they're going that direction. And then something else comes in, and it's difficult to prioritize when that's the flow of information. And then making sure that then all those external partners are getting things the way that they want them, the way that they should receive them consistently. Now, having implemented the portal here in the spring, partnered with Hatch, it's gone very well. I think the biggest change for us is not so much the changes and processes that we have to adapt to having a portal, but it just is a simpler process for our external partners. We wanted to have a portal not to compete with our competitor, but to really offer something that is going to improve that communication, making sure that they get things consistently, like I talked about before, and starting there, because that's what we've heard from all of those external partners.
A very clear theme is already emerging in this conversation. when it comes to workers' comp, you compete on experience.
Mm.
Experience is at the heart of it. It's the pride that these teams have. Even if they don't have any technology in place, the amount of times I hear a well-oiled machine, a button-up process, that's really important. The scaling part, which we'll get to in a little bit, is what adds wrinkles because you have to maintain that trust, that expectation, setting that experience as you grow. Shannon, what about you? What have you done specifically, or your team rather, to really take what you're doing to the next level recently?
Sure. So we have a centralized coordinator that directs all workers' compensation, whether it's speaking with the patient, employers, adjusters, nurse case managers. That is key, where they feel like they have that right hand with them along the ride. Another important step that we have taken is the physicians have to have the buy-in as well.
Mm.
They are a big part of the picture. They have to understand workers' compensation and how it works. They need to understand what the needs are and that there can't be delays. That's very big. They also have to be willing to have those conversations with all of the folks that are involved in the care of this injured employee. And then on top of that, we have also introduced the portal with Hatch, which is centralized for not only the care team inside of ABJ, but the care team on the outside to look at the process of how treatment's going for that injured worker. And then also knowing that there's one centralized place where we have to go and kind of like Chris said, not all the emails or the phone calls or the voicemails, it's right there. And another thing that we really like about it as well is we have a nice way to track our referrals. Whereas before we had many spreadsheets and things, and it is also now in one centralized place.
Mm. Toni, I'm going to come to you in a second, but Andrea just asked an amazing question. Chris, Shannon, can you guys take this one? What recommendations do you have for strengthening physician buy-in? Look him up. He's fantastic. He does a lot of consulting in the workers' comp space. And he said something to the effect, Andrea, if I might take the first stab at this, that if you can find that one physician to really invest in that is ready to go full throttle for workers' comp, that is the tip of the spear. Like they can make the wake that everybody flies behind. But Shannon, Chris, I would love to hear your perspective. And then Toni, if I'm overstepping in terms of physician bias, even on the MSO level, I would love to hear your thoughts as well. Shannon?
Sure. So I would echo what you just said, Joe. We have one physician who had the buy-in from the get-go. So he is paving the path for the practice as well. And he will have some of those hard conversations with the other physicians like, hey, we need to do A and B like so, and here's the why behind it. I think that's an important piece just in general for everybody to have the why so we can gravitate and follow through. And then also we're a hard stop here at the practice. If the physician isn't going to do a good job, then they don't get to see the workers' compensation patients until they can really give that 100% of what's needed.
Yeah, I can add to that. When I started, that was one of the things that we worked on was understanding really who really wants to see work comp. I think when it's asked and again in the boardroom and all the positions are there, they all kind of raise their hands at different heights as to how much they really want to do it. We sat down with each of our physicians and really just tried to not only get to know them, but also understand, who they want to be, in terms of their practice. If they want work comp to be part of it, how much they want it to be part of it. And then we kind of took our group of 26 physicians and, if half of them really want to do it, finding out the ones who are really going to be kind of on that A team, and they're going to be the ones to work the patients in. We have opportunities for all of our physicians to still end up with work comp when they come in different ways, but making sure that they have some non-negotiables as part of that. And so we created a contract actually with the backing of our physician leaders on the executive team that really says, here are the things we need. We need the work status report out same day. We need notes done within 48 hours. We need you to do an impairment rating within X amount of days. We need IMEs done certain ways. And you're going to benefit from that. But we really created that contract that they can all then go back to. And it gives us, a way to kind of keep them accountable and really have their buy-in. So that's really also what's worked well for us.
Let me ask a quick follow-up question from the peanut gallery here. Say you have 20 docs. Do you need all 20 to have a meaningfully competitive, viable service line for workers' comp? Or do you need 1 or 5? What's the mix?
I think for us it's just making sure that we have, at least in some of our markets, that we have a doctor that actually sees all the body parts. Because if we have one market that doesn't see spine, then we lose out on those referrals. So that's what we like to have.
I would echo that. And I think in addition to that, it's really just making sure that they have their ducks in a row in terms of the processes, and they really want to see those patients and kind of, not that they have to treat them differently than a commercial patient, but they can't just do what the patient wants.
Okay, Toni, transitioning back to kind of the tail end of the second set of questions here around what you've done. It's an old phrase, people, process, and technology, right? But things become phrases and cliches and idioms and axioms and whatnot because, well, they're true. And so I'm curious, Toni, from a people and process standpoint, what have you done with your centralized team to ensure that machine runs well and that you're able to service at the MSO level these national partners and make sure that that transition into the more local kind of endpoint practice runs smoothly?
Before we formed the MSO, we had several independent divisions that were operating independently. Every single division had their own work comp department or team, and they were all doing things very differently. So when we came together, we had to take bits and pieces of what all those divisions were doing, evaluate it, and then form our own standardized process. What might have been working well with our Dallas divisions might not have been working well in our East Texas division. So we came up with a process, and we really trained in and honed on those workflows and standardized processes across all of our different departments. Technology has played a significant role in that. Now, we were only able to go so far, but I think implementing Hatch, because we weren't able to really have the data to be able to report on how quickly we were turning referrals around. And so now with Hatch, we've been able to better measure our performance. We regularly review our turnaround times, our referral volumes, and then based on that, if we were seeing delays, then we can take that data and pivot and improve in areas where we need to.
Thank you. Okay, we had an anonymous question come in here. This is a good one, and I'm going to break it apart into two parts, and I promise Miss or Mr. Anonymous that we'll get to the provider question of it. Part 3 here is really about investments, and opening access is a big part. Chris, I think you were the one that mentioned earlier that access to timely care is a huge part of making the machine run. There's a lot of different facets, from the expectation setting, the workflows you have, the capacity, not just in terms of access, but literally in terms of being able to treat the whole body and being a relevant solution in the first place by not having a care gap or a specialty gap there. The first part of this question is really about investments that you're making. You guys have mentioned technology like Hatch and the portal side of things. What else are you guys doing in terms of people and process? Chris, starting with you, what's next on your roadmap as you fight the good fight to be a better partner and a better care provider for these employees?
I think like we talked about, the relationships, that's really the direction we're going. So we take a lot of time, like I talked about, meeting with all of our physicians, getting their buy-in. We spend a lot of time meeting with all of our adjusters, nurse case managers, different employers, attorney groups, and hearing their feedback as to why they haven't used us or why we haven't been a big player in the market. We've implemented a lot of their suggestions. And so now we're going to work on following through with those, but we want that relationship that our physicians have with patients also to extend to those external partners. So we're creating a bunch of collisions with an attorney group coming in and educating some of our physicians who want to do work comp on best ways to phrase things, verbiage for IMEs, impairment ratings, having nurse case managers be able to meet with our physicians, even for a half an hour, do a webinar. And adjusters in the state of Iowa now require continuing education credits. So we're working into that where we can offer Con Ed hours for adjusters by way of our physicians. So that's really our next venture here through Q3, Q4.
Nice. So you're doing essentially a market research and gap analysis and actually following through on what you're hearing in those conversations. Okay, while I'm still on you, Chris, I want to go back to the second part of this anonymous question, which is really encouraging providers to see workers' comp if they've historically opted out of it. With Andrew's question from before, we know that a great way to get started is to find Dr. Champion, your physician champion, and like steer clear of Dr. Vito that says no, right? But say that you've done this. And I might be ignorant here, so correct me if I'm wrong. But there's capacity within the physicians. If they're not doing workers' comp now, there's some capacity there to offer more and to be able to do more volume. And so what does it look like to win over maybe somebody that's been lukewarm or historically not pro workers' comp? What does that look like?
So we when we met with all of our physicians, there were a few who really haven't done much. And I don't know if it's just because a lot of the referrals get directed to certain ones who employers, adjusters are comfortable with. So that's what we've used when we've gone out and met with our external partners. They're like, I don't really know who some of your doctors are. Is X, Y, and Z still there? And we're like, no, they retired 2 years ago. We have 7 new ones, though, in the last 14 months. Would you like to come in and meet them? Some have wanted to meet them, some haven't, but we've really encouraged those referral sources, send us a patient. We have full confidence in our new spine doc, and, send it to us and he'll take care of you. And so really asking for those patients, and it doesn't have to be the perfect referral, but then we want your feedback. What do they do right? What do they do wrong? And continuing that relationship of the feedback both ways, because work comp is not going to be done perfectly every single time by a physician who's even been around for a while. And so, but as long as that external partner feels that they have, a way to continually refine the process, they have the buy-in, we're building that trust with them as well.
One of the things Toni just said about a hatch benefit, not to toot our own horn a little bit, but that visibility into where things may have stalled or where those gaps are. Because Shannon, next question for you. You're the one that mentioned that, if somebody has a bad experience, like you might cut off that referral source or damage that relationship. And what Chris has described is really writ large, this proactive approach to education is a key way, because workers' comp is a spinning top. If you leave it alone, it's going to fall apart. And so, Shannon, what are you doing to protect the partner relationships as you keep growing? In addition to the portal investment, are you out and about in the community? What are you guys doing?
Yep. So our business development team member, she's really out and about with the community, trying to make those connections with the partners and hopefully potential new partners that come on board to ABJ. It's about, building that relationship and asking them the questions like, what works for you? What doesn't work for you? What have we done in the past that really, upset you, that made your workload that much harder? And then taking that back and then trying to refine those mistakes that we made. The workload for the partners is amazing to me because it's heavy and they have a lot of things they're juggling. So I think if we could make it easier for them, that makes it best for everybody across the board.
Toni, your centralized team, your national partnerships, what's next?
As we continue to grow, our focus shifts from not just maintaining our volume, but how we can better support our providers and our referral sources. I think that also honing in on where our hurdles are and improving those. And I know that, the panel and the audience have asked really good questions about, physicians and taking work comp or changing their mind and not seeing it any longer. We never want to get to a point to where a provider is like, I don't want to see work comp anymore. It's just too complex. And I think that's where our centralized team comes in, and we meet with that provider and we give them some tools. Okay, this is what we're seeing that you're doing, and you could be doing this. And so we kind of provide that education to maybe keep them going and keep seeing these patients. And so really just how can we better serve our providers and our referral sources and honing in on that.
We're about to go to the Q&A portion. And so if you've been listening in so far, feel free to drop in any questions that you have based on the conversation so far. If you go away from a magic wand and fix one thing about workers' comp, either in your practice or industry-wide, what would that thing be? What do you think, Chris?
I think for us, it's, and I think this is probably true for any organization, whether it's hospital-based or private practice, you want to make sure that all parts of that organization are working for the same comp goal, right? They're working for the patient. Now, work comp has been kind of on the outside of that process for a while because it was so small as part of our volume. It was a work comp referral would come in, let's just pass that off and let's hand it over there. So I think as we grow, it's looking at not what can we offload to our other employees, but how can they help with the process to make sure that it's a seamless experience for not only that patient employee, but also those external partners coming into the system.
Anybody else want to jump in?
Joe, I think if I had a magic wand, I would love for work comp easier to navigate. I mean, we know it's complex. There's a lot of moving pieces. So I think making it, just navigation easier.
Yeah.
And then my magic wand also would be able to get the buy-in from all the physicians in a perfect world.
That's a
Yeah.
good one, Shannon.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Feel free to drop in questions. I got a whole bunch of them, but I really liked what you guys just said. Having the staff grow with you, having it be easier to navigate and getting that buy-in. Workers' comp, from what I've learned over the past couple of years, I think it averages maybe 8 to 12% of the revenue of a given practice. But it's growing, and you can kind of feel it. It's growing in importance because of what it represents from a reimbursement standpoint, and also this broader movement, not necessarily towards direct care, but more direct relationships with local employers, given the 192 million Americans that are on self-funded plans, right? And so practices, particularly the independent practices, maybe that are still like a player in their space, ABJ, you might be one of them, MSO, you guys have kind of teamed up to remain fiercely independent. And so I think it's just a really curious thing that maybe will help with the physician buy-in conversations, which is referral streams are in their nature not forever. They adapt, they change, they're impacted by experience, they're impacted by competition and consolidation, and they need to be managed, right? And you need visibility into those referral streams to know, because you can't manage what you can't measure. And so if I were to unsolicited say something around waving a magic wand, it's just like, recognize that workers' comp is not just a referral. It is one that represents a broader strategy in terms of maintaining independence by being closer to, and particularly within employer-directed states, to the employers in your area to have more defensible revenue streams that are under less pressure from maybe the big box healthcare system down the street. I'll start with you, Chris, on this one. You mentioned earlier in the conversation some of the metrics that you're paying attention to that matter in terms of how fast notes go back. What else are you paying attention to ensure that you're really winning and competing in workers' comp outside of just raw volume?
Yeah. For work comp, we've never really done any type of NPS scoring or patient satisfaction. But that's one thing that we're starting to look at is how can we measure some of the satisfaction of our external partners, to not only, routinely just get the feedback on how the process went, but being able to quantify that to some degree. And so we're starting to look into that, in terms of just other basic metrics. I think you're more referring to certainly all the volumes and everything. But, I think our organization in the past, before we had Hatch, just looked at like total charges and total gross amounts. And we're starting to really look at, now that we have Hatch and the ability to drill down on really anything we put into the system, not only looking at the turnaround times and what we're converting to surgery and what we're not, but who are we receiving referrals from consistently? Who's the nurse case manager on some of those? And following up with them, what haven't we received from some of those that we were getting a lot from? What happened there? And so being able to follow up on some of those and have those conversations to proactively try to either mend fences or continue building, on a successful care for an employer, utilizing what Hash has to offer.
Toni, what about you? What metrics are you looking at, particularly with a centralized team and making sure that runs smooth?
Well, I mean, I guess really it depends on who you ask. Like for employers, what they care about is getting their patients or their workers back to work. And then if you ask us, it's how quickly we can, get that patient's care going and taken care of. But, and I don't know if this answers your question, but prior to Hatch, I was not able to tell you how many Concentra referrals we had gotten or from CareNow. I think now that we have implemented Hatch, I will be able to see if our CareNow referrals have dropped off or if they have increased. So winning to me is looking at that data over several months and saying, oh, our referrals have increased from Concentra or they've increased from CareNow. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you. Shannon?
Yeah, just like Tony, that data point is really important for us because we also did not have a great way to measure the referral sources. So we are very excited about that because you don't know what you don't know, right? And now we have a clear, better view and a way to track that.
Thank you. Maybe this is the marketer in me, but we've got a question from Andrea here about additional strategies to engage new employers. She does her best to maintain communication, apply feedback, and increase volume, but breaking into a new employer, there's been a lot of conversation about education. And maybe I'll kick off part of this, which is knowing who is in your area, knowing where your referrals come from is a good place to start, because then, similar to what Chris was talking about earlier with the market research on where to grow and expand workers' comp capabilities, you can identify where the opportunities are. I'm curious, Shannon, do you employ physician liaisons, business development? What does your strategy look like to market workers' comp and make it more marketable in the first place?
Yeah. So we do Maggie, our business development, goes out and meets with employers, new employers or whatnot. But one thing that has worked well historically for us is you bring that physician along with you to see the physician in person, meet with them, talk with them, whether it's like a short coffee or lunch. They see the human side of the physician instead of it's just this physician treating a patient. And I think that goes a very long way.
Thank you. So how do you know maybe it's time to expand or grow the team? Are there certain breaking points? And maybe Chris, I'll start with you here because I want to give you a shout out. One of the things that you did when you first joined DMOS was you did a time study, and you were able to identify, well, quite frankly, how much time certain parts of the process took to figure out where the optimization opportunities were, and then also create a bit of I don't want to say performance score, but capacity or of each individual player on the team to really see how much volume you could take on. So could you talk a little bit to that, Chris?
Sure. Yeah, I think when I started in September of last year, I heard right away, we need more staff. And there's always this inherent need for more staff as things are busy. And I knew that a lot of the processes needed to change, but we can only change so much right away. And so I wanted to identify really, are we at a deficit? And if so, how much? And so through that time study and measuring a lot of the different types of patients and types of encounters that came through and quantifying numbers with that, and then looking at productivity efficiencies for different staff, really was able to determine that we are lagging behind on 3/4 of an FTE. And if we're going to grow, we're probably going to need a full one. So that was an easy way for me to quantify the need for that. But it's tough to come in and just change a whole bunch of things. But I think I try to tell my team, change is inevitable. You got to be open to everything and attached to nothing, because as we grow and progress with not only volumes, but, different processes, things are just going to continually change. And, we have to have that proactive mindset.
Thanks, Chris. Anybody else want to chime in on this one on when to grow people versus maybe when to optimize? We had a question from an anonymous attendee here around, does Hatch have availability to track time until back to work? And so I'll give a short answer there. The system is really built to be an end-to-end for the workers' comp referral cycle. Each key milestone is tracked. So time to triage, time to schedule. But for the anonymous attendee specifically, if you want to email me that question from your address, I'll have our VP of product answer it to a really fine level of detail. Thank you for asking. We've got about 3 minutes left here. Maybe just one wrap-up question for Toni before I do my spiel at the end here. Centralization is a theme across referral management, across workers' comp. So when you think about building that team, are you cross-training people within that, or do you have specialists for certain aspects of the workers' comp process? It really seems like having a dedicated centralized team that really knows the stuff. You even use these team members, as you mentioned earlier, to go out there and educate what tools physicians have available, going back to some of Andrea's questions about physician buy-in.
So when we first stood up the MSO, we had one person that was doing verifications, authorizations for each of the divisions. So as we grew, we decided to only have, I have a team that just verify. I have a team that just does authorization. And so that that has really kind of helped us be a little bit more successful, just those designated teams. And did I hit on your point there?
Yes, having dedicated teams and really focusing on knowing the workers' comp workflow inside and out so that they can be a resource, not just for the partners, but also for the internal teams in terms of buy-in. Chris, have a question here. What is the feedback you get from TPAs and employers who use Hatch? Can you provide specific employers and TPA examples?
Sure. So like Zboch, they're big TPA. We have, local individuals here in Des Moines using it. And so the feedback for them has been very good because, they're able to upload, download, manage their large amount of cases that they're currently managing and be able to go to one location. We also have another TC. We already had a good relationship with them. And so they've been able to provide really good feedback to us just on, hey, it would be nice if you had this. It'd be nice if you had that. And us being able to then work with Patch on, hey, thought about adding some of these features. And then even just the employers, some of them are self-funded. So just being able to give them back the information when it's usually someone in HR, or maybe they have a nurse on site who's managing that, being able to give them the portal concept that they're already familiar with, just probably from their own private insurance, and being able to extend that then to how they have to manage all those claims for their employees.
All right, we're coming up on time. Andrea, I know there's a question from you there. I will email you with all the panelists CC to make sure that we get that answered. I want to thank y'all for hanging out with us today. It's 12:45. Andrea, you talked about growth. You seem like you're in a growth mindset. We have created in partnership with one of our practices a growth assessment tool for workers' comp. I'll send that over to you. And then for anybody else still on, we do have a workers' comp offer right now on the Hatch side of things. So feel free to reach out to me about that. That's a little no-cost trial to get your feet wet and what it could look like to take that experience to the next level. Toni, Shannon, Chris, thank you so much for your time today. It's always good to see your faces, and your wisdom is awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.